My name is Camila Rivera. 10 years I taught a megachurch to breathe together until the night a hot mic told me the truth. Keep her smiling till the audit clears. Laughter, glasses clink. That was my pastor and my husband. By morning, I wasn't a choir director. I was a problem to be managed, a breakdown to be branded, a woman they could call a thief if I didn't play along. Their new miracle? An app that helps you pray. It also asks for your contacts, your mic, your location, and your trust. So I did the one thing you're not supposed to do when holy men hold the keys. I left, changed my name, landed in New Orleans with a cracked keyboard, 11 kids, and a girl with a violin who could barely catch her breath. They said I ran. I didn't run. I turned around. Because if you think prayers don't have price tags, stay. In the next hour, I'll play you the laughter I heard, show you the contracts they hid, and introduce you to the child whose song made a state listen. Take a breath with me. 4 in, 2 hold, 6 out. Okay, let's begin. Outside, the Texas evening still held its heat like a grudge. Floodlights bathed the parking lot in stadium white. At the far end, a billboard cheerfully declared, "Welcome home," with Grant's face beside the church logo. He looked younger up there than he did in a mirror, younger than he looked to me when he was too tired to hide the ambition that never learned to sleep. He was a good talker, a better fundraiser, and an excellent judge of when a woman would work herself to pieces if only you told her it was holy. In the choir room, rows of black robes hung like silent witnesses. Someone had left a peppermint on the piano lid. I slid onto the bench and placed both hands on the keys without pressing down, imagining the sound of an E major chord warming the room. My breath evened. I counted the seconds until the boardroom door opened down the hall and the meeting spilled into the corridor like cologne. "Cam, there you are," Grant called, cheerful, surprised. Surprise is a practiced tone in men who plan everything. "We missed you at the last amen." "I had to check on the robes," I said, because a lie that silly is almost a dare. He came in and leaned on the doorframe. His cufflinks flashed like little mirrors. "We had a great session. Eden says the adoption rates are exceeding expectations. You'll love what we do with the music integration." "Adoption rates?" I repeated softly. "For the app," he said. "Prayer well. People tell us what they need and we connect them with the right resources and scriptures. It's elegant. It's compassionate. It's metrics that we can translate into action." "What do they give you in return?" I asked. "The chance to serve them better." He smiled as if kindness could be trademarked. "You're tired. The launch and the tour and the governor's breakfast. There's a lot on your plate. But we're close, Cam. The audit will clear, we'll finalize the Texas grant, and you'll have the budget you begged me for, 40 kids in strings, a real recording rig, all of it." "You told the board to keep me smiling till the audit clears," I said. He didn't blink. Men like Grant keep the ocean of their faces smooth. "You misheard. There's a lot of chatter back there." "Maybe, but I know a laugh when I hear it." "Cam," he said quietly, "you have a gift with people. Don't twist it into suspicion. The enemy loves suspicion. Sometimes where you grew up, the enemy is the devil. In our church, the enemy is anybody who asks where the money goes." I slept 2 hours that night. I dreamed of counting cash in 8 counts like a run, dreamed of children's hands raised like choir notes on a staff and a vacuum cleaner sucking them down the aisle. At 3:02 a.m., I turned on my bedside lamp and stared at the stacks of choir charts on the dresser. Paper smells different at night. The house was silent except for the refrigerator's judder and a distant car. I got up, made coffee I didn't need, and opened my laptop. You can learn almost anything at 3 a.m. if your heart is breaking. I read Prayerwell's terms again. I mapped the LLCs that fed it, sister companies with pretty names and P.O. boxes inside other P.O. boxes. I searched county procurement records and found a line item for community wellness engagement, with a temporary waiver of competitive bidding due to proprietary data assets, language so careful it felt like hands in white gloves. I clicked through to a pilot memorandum with a data dictionary. Contact list ingestion, microphone access, location pings, prayer request content flagged for sentiment analysis and crisis referral. I reached for my coffee and knocked it over with a clatter that sounded like a warning. I wiped the desk with a choir t-shirt, then sat with wet hands and read the last page 3 times. Not illegal, I kept telling myself. Maybe not. Maybe it's just the new way we say amen. At sunrise, I packed a carry-on with a toothbrush, 2 dresses, my old sheet music notebook, and the blue scarf my mother gave me the day I left San Juan at 19 because she thought it would keep airplanes from falling out of the sky. I put my choir binder on top of the piano and wrote on an index card, "Borrowing this, blame God," and tucked it under the metronome because I didn't know whether humor would be a bridge or a bomb in my next life. Then I drove to a gas station and bought a burner phone. The clerk had a tattoo of a tiny sparrow on his wrist. "These are great for privacy," he said, not making eye contact. "Is privacy a thing anymore?" I asked. "Not if you want to make someone proud," he said, and I couldn't tell if he was joking. At noon, I pulled into a long-term lot at the Austin bus terminal. A billboard for Prayerwell smiled down at me from the overpass. I took out my regular phone and recorded a voice memo for myself that I knew I would delete. "This is a formal leave of absence. I am not resigning. I am returning what wasn't mine, your version of me." It felt dramatic, but sometimes dramatic is another word for true. I shut the phone off and removed the SIM card. It was a tiny thing, a sliver of metal and memory. I snapped it with my fingernail. The sound was as small as a crumb breaking. I bought a ticket to New Orleans because New Orleans felt like a city that knows how to carry a secret without letting it rot. On the bus, a woman with hair the color of brass sat beside me and took out a bag of pecans. "You running from a man?" she asked without malice. "From a story," I said. She cracked a pecan and handed me half. "Same difference till you change the ending." New Orleans smelled like rain when we pulled into the terminal. Street music braided itself through diesel and coffee. I took a rideshare to the lower Ninth because the driver said his aunt had a store there that still sold La Llave coffee and the good kind of plantain chips. "Tell Tia Sol I sent you," he said. And I said I would if I met her. Tia Sol's corner store had a cat who slept very seriously on top of the ATM. The bell over the door made a sound like a grateful child. The woman behind the counter had gray curls tucked into a scarf and a voice that could slice bread. "You look like you can sing," she said, as if it were a crime. "I can," I said cautiously. "Then grab that crate and help me stack plantains on the display," she said. "Singing is math. So is balance." I lugged crates of fruit and bottles and joked that it counted as a warm-up. She looked me up and down and handed me a bottle of water. "You're not from here." "No," I said. "You're not staying with family." "No." "You need a room and a job if I'm any kind of reader." I nodded. "I have a storage room that used to be a room before it was storage," she said. "It's not nice, but it's dry and you won't owe me your soul. $200 a week. You can work the register 2 afternoons till you climb up someplace else." "Deal," I said, and my eyes stung, which is how you know a deal is grace. "Name?" she asked, reaching for a notebook. "Mila," I said. It jumped out of my mouth as if it had been waiting there. "Mila Cruz." She paused as if she heard another name standing behind it. Then she wrote carefully. "You can be whoever you want in this city," she said. "Just make sure you're not nobody." That night I lay on a narrow bed with springs that sang lullabies in a key of their own and wrote 3 lines in my old music notebook. Breathe, count, begin again. Count. In the morning, I walked to a community center that used to be a dance hall and now smelled like old varnish and resolve. The director, a man with a bow tie who had rolled his sleeves up as if the day were about to turn into overtime, gave me a tour. "We have yoga when the teacher shows up, GED tutoring, and a 3-month-old idea for an after-school that needs a name," he said. "You good with kids?" "I'm good with listening," I said. "You play piano," he said, not as a question. He had the way about him that detects which hands have touched living things and which have touched spreadsheets. "We have a keyboard that barely qualifies as an instrument." "Barely is a start," I said. He took me into a room with a wobbly table and 4 folding chairs. A keyboard with 3 dead keys leaned against the wall. Someone had left a crayon drawing of a house with smoke coming out of the chimney, even though it was June. I pressed middle C, and it sounded like a promise. The director grinned. "I'm Jules Broussard," he said. "People call me JB. If you're Mila, welcome to the circus." JB was a former public defender who had burned out on the sound of doors closing. I lost cases because my clients didn't have phones who could load the forms the court insists are easy, he said in the slow way New Orleanians have of telling you exactly how complicated a thing is. Now I try to keep kids out of doorways. We started with 6 kids. By the end of the week, we had 11, and a girl named Miri, whose violin was the color of old honey and whose breath sometimes hitchhiked like she had to remind it where to go. Asthma, her mother said apologetically, as if she had chosen it off a shelf. The clinic says we're fine, but the waiting list for the specialist is a month. We'll teach her to breathe on 4s, I said. Music is medicine, even when medicine is late. I made photocopies of simple rounds and wrote the phonetic syllables under the notes because some of the kids had never opened a music book and others had cracked them like treasure chests for years. We sang Lean on Me in the hallway, and the way they smiled at the line, "You just call on me, brother," when you need a hand made me wonder why we let politicians say they're the ones who invented help. On the second Saturday, we held a fundraiser that was mostly an excuse to bring people into the building so they could smell what hope does to wood. We borrowed a brass trio from a cousin of a cousin, and a baker donated king cake with a warning not to sue if the plastic baby broke someone's tooth. We put a jar by the door with a Sharpie sign that said, "For instrument repairs and snacks, because holiness is nothing without snacks." People came. They danced carefully so the floor wouldn't remember its age. It was at that fundraiser that Eden Vale appeared. She walked in like a neutral fragrance, expensive and designed to be invisible. Her blazer was white, and her smile was something designers pitch as appropriate for sensitive skin. I saw her before she saw me, and my skin stood up the way a field does when a storm is coming. "Miss Cruz," she said, as if she had been practicing the name. "I'm Eden. I work with community engagement for faith-based initiatives. We've seen your videos. Your kids are remarkable." "We didn't post any videos," I said. "Others did," she said. "It's a small world when people hurt in the same places." "What brings you?" "An opportunity," she said, and took a tablet from her bag. She swiped to a slick presentation with pastel colors and soft edges, the kind of typography that makes you think nothing bad could happen to you again if you just sign your consent. Prayerwell offers sponsorships to qualified programs, matching in-kind support, visibility. All we require is onboarding your parent group to our app so we can align resources with needs. What does onboarding mean? Let us love them better, she said, the way someone says free samples. Does your love ask for a microphone? Only in the sense that we want to hear, she said smoothly. What else does your love want? Location helps when the ambulance is needed, she said, as if she had just invented the concept of care. Permission to connect families to partners who can help. Partners like our church? Of course, she said, and the word hugged itself. Do you have the audit report the board promised in Austin? I asked. She flinched so fast I felt guilty for enjoying it. Then she smiled again. Your story is different from the rumors, she said. We want to help you write a new one. We're not a content vertical, I said. We're a room with air. I'll follow up, she said, which is what you say when you intend to follow through, not up. After she left, JB asked me who she was, and I told him the truth I could afford. The COO of someone else's God, I said. We met mostly in the mornings, so the kids who needed to watch little siblings in the afternoons could still have something of their own. Miri learned to play in phrases that made new rooms in her face. After 2 weeks, she could hold the air at the end of a line without looking like she was bargaining for it, and we clapped so loudly you would have thought we were in church. On a humid Tuesday, the community center phone rang while I was labeling a box of mismatched reeds. JB picked up and paused halfway through his greeting. He turned away slightly, but the room is small and the air carries. No, he said slowly. She's not here under that name. I don't know anyone by that name. Silence. Who's calling? Silence. We're busy. Good day. When he hung up, he looked at me with the face of a friend who wants to keep your peace and knows he can't. Texas number, he said. They asked for Acamilla. My aunt used to say a name is a door, I said. Sometimes people knock because they want to come home. Sometimes they knock because they want to kick it down. Is there anything I should know? He asked. Enough to make me think about leaving again, I said, and hated how that sounded, how my voice made escape a reflex. "Then know this," he said. "We've all left something. If we keep running, we just make a circle." It rained that week, the kind of rain that doesn't lower the temperature but teaches you new words for heavy. I slept under a fan that ticked like a clock with asthma and wrote in my notebook, "If they name your pain content, they'll buy it wholesale." I copied it in block letters because sometimes you need to bully yourself into seeing. A rumor can travel faster than joy, even when joy is the only thing worth packing. 2 days after Eden visited, a clip of our fundraiser appeared on a megachurch youth page with captions that made us sound like the demo version of Better People. Comments bloomed like mold. So inspiring, so raw, so authentic, so real, like they found a new way to say poor without making their throats feel mean. I wanted to shut the doors and play scales so loud the internet would feel embarrassed. Instead, I bought more paper plates and learned the names of 3 grandmothers who bring their own folding chairs to everything because they don't trust a world that promises you a seat. Miri collapsed at the end of a lesson on a Friday that had already asked too much from everyone. One moment she was playing Ode to Joy like a kid on a bicycle, and the next she looked at me with a surprise that felt like apology and slid gently to the side. Her bow clattered on the floor. A thin red line spilled from her nose. I knelt and placed her head on my lap and said her name as if the syllables were prayer beads. JB called the clinic, and the clinic said they would do what they could. An old nurse with hair a color that time invents squeezed my arm in the hallway. "Hold her hand," she said. "Don't ask how long. Just hold." The next morning, I took the ring my grandmother left me out of the bottom of my bag. It had a sapphire the color of the sliver of ocean you see under a low plane. It was the only thing I had not pawned when I left because I told myself a woman needs one gorgeous thing that is not a lie. I wrapped it in tissue and walked to a jeweler who looked at me as if he knew the day on which I had forgotten my worth. He paused a beat longer than he needed to before he gave me a number. I nodded. There is dignity in paying for a child's blood work with your inheritance. The check felt cold when I slid it under the clinic window. The receptionist looked at me the way you look at people who just chose a cloud over a castle. That night, Eden texted JB with an offer. I know because he showed me, and because you can tell when a message is a hook. Matching funds up to $250K, immediate. All you have to do is onboard your parent group to the app. That sentence has more teeth than a private aquarium. I printed the message and taped it to the wall and wrote over it with a Sharpie, "What is the cost of applause?" We fought about it softly in the hallway where the kids draw on the walls lower than adults ever think to look. JB said, "We can do due diligence. We can carve out the mic permission. We can protect our list." I said, "They don't want our list. They want our trust." He said, "We can fence that too." I said, "Fences keep the wrong things in." He rubbed his eyes, and the skin under his eyes told me secrets about his nights. Miri's mom works doubles. She sleeps on a bus twice a week. She will say yes for breath. What do we say? That a principal tastes better than air? "We say I'll find the money," I said. "We say I already started." "You sold something," he said gently. "I sold a story I was supposed to keep," I said. "Turns out I don't like being told what a story is for." I didn't sleep much after that. I had the sensation of a dog's bark in the distance, the kind that doesn't stop and makes you feel as if you forgot to lock every door you own. At dawn, I opened my notebook and wrote in tiny letters to make my hand slow down. The holy thing about truth is that it sets you free. What they don't tell you is, first it burns everything you're willing to lose. That afternoon, a volunteer from a neighborhood church emailed a photo from our fundraiser to a city page. The world is a small town when you've once been famous for keeping other people's secrets. In Austin, someone recognized my mouth. In Houston, someone recognized the scar on my wrist I got when a 4th grade boy yanked my bracelet because he wanted a souvenir of affection. In Dallas, someone recognized the dress because they had linked it once in a modest fashion post. The comments called me a villain with a soft voice. The comments called me lost. The comments called me repentant because they wanted repentant to be enough. Grant called JB's cell. JB declined the call. Then he called again and again, as if persistence were proof. Finally, JB answered and laid the phone on the table between us and pressed speaker. Cam? Grant crooned. Camilla? Her name is Mila, JB said. Grant paused for half a beat. We love you, he said. A sentence designed to make walking away look like a stabbing. We want you home. The allegations are serious. People are confused. Come on record and settle it. We can resolve the audit quietly. Release the audit, I said. My voice felt like stone standing in a river. There are processes, he said. You invented those, I said. You're sick, he said suddenly, as if kindness were a knife he had been waiting to use. You had a breakdown. We tried to help. You're not well. We prayed. You prayed and you planted microphones, I said. You prayed and you asked the county to waive the bid because your app needed the scent of Sunday on it. Camilla, he said softly, switching to the code that works on people who grew up being told obedience is love. Don't do this. JB ended the call. His hand shook and he laid it flat on the table to tell it its job again. What now? He asked. Now we tell the truth out loud, I said. The sentence scared me enough that I knew it was the right one. We didn't have a PR team. We had a gym, a projector that needed coaxing like an old uncle, a borrowed screen, a cast-off tripod, and several hundred people sick of being told their pain was a rounding error in somebody else's quarterly report. I wrote my notes in pen and then threw them away because a voice can't read its own rescue. We set up folding chairs in the gym under the fans that made a sound like a choir of bees. Someone hung a banner that said, "The River School," because kids named the thing before the form did. JB made copies of county records with black boxes hiding the names of people who did their jobs and not hiding the names of those who dissolved verbs into fog. A neighborhood pastor who had scanned the prayer well QR between hymns brought his deacons. An auntie who knows who's sleeping with whom in a 5-block radius brought a tray of pralines and 3 cousins who have a talent for standing shoulder to shoulder in doorways. At 7 o'clock, we went live on a platform not owned by anyone whose piety comes with a superior customer success team. The viewer counter sat at 41, then 63, then 142. I held the mic and it felt like holding back a river. You don't know me, I began. You know something about me. You know what you've been told. Tonight I want to tell you what I heard when I stood behind a curtain on a night when the lights were too bright and the truth was too loud to be a coincidence. I played the stage side mic bleed. I let the laughter breathe long enough for people to put faces on it. Then I took a breath and said, I believe in prayer. I also believe in receipts. This is a receipt. I told them about our kids. I told them about Miri's hands tightening on a bow like a lifeline. I told them about an app that asked for a permission slip for your soul. I told them about waivers that translate as we know someone. I told them about loving people into data. The comments flooded like weather. Liar, 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 queen, sister. Shut up, go on, prove it, keep talking. JB stepped to the side of the screen and walked people through a procurement document the way you walk a friend through a bad dream. Here, he said, gentle. Here. See the date stamp? The annex? The criteria you didn't get to vote on because voting is for products, not donors. He was careful not to make county workers sound like villains because the villain is usually a system that taught them to look at the wrong thing, Grant called. The name appeared as unknown, but the rhythm of his breath gave him away. You're live, I said without greeting. Cam, he said, a prayer with knives. I'm so sorry to see you like this. We tried to help you. I'll say this publicly if I have to. You're ill. This is a cry for attention. Everything we do is a cry for attention, I said, and the room laughed because sometimes truth is a tiny knife that makes a hole big enough for air to come in. We comment on our own birthdays, Grant. Camilla, he continued, if you continue to defame our ministry, we will be forced to protect the people of Texas from your lies. The people of Texas don't need your protection from my lies, I said. They need protection from your contracts. The Attorney General's office sent observers. We knew because a woman in a blazer with sensible shoes and a face that does not accept cookies nodded at JB and took a seat near the aisle as if she had a plan for anything that needed leaving fast. Eden flooded the chat with cease and desist language. Bots multiplied like flies at a picnic. A neighborhood kid who knows more about code than I know about Coral Blend looked up from his phone and snorted. Amateurs, he said, and told a cousin to flip a setting. I should tell you that the exact legal mechanisms shifted then, but in truth what happened felt less like law and more like the oldest judgment on earth, a room deciding whom it trusts. A local pastor stood and said, "We scanned a QR because we thought it was a verse of the day. It led to a landing page we didn't understand, and then to join the family. Maybe we're fools. Maybe we just wanted help. But I didn't sign up my sheep for a harvest." Miri walked on stage with her violin. I shook my head. She shook hers back. The bow trembled in her hand and then steadied as if a parent had caught it. She played the beginning of something we all knew and then veered right into something she made up in that moment. Notes strung like lights across power lines that should have fallen in the storm, but didn't. I heard my own breath and thought, this is why God keeps letting us try again, even when we build terrible things in His name. Because sometimes a child plays a line that proves survival isn't a rumor. The officers stood at the back. They weren't there to take me. They were there to deliver papers to people who build shelves in the air for things that aren't theirs. They watched the stream and checked boxes and then did the careful walk to the door that says, "This is official but not cruel." When the stream ended, I put the mic down because I was shaking, and because sometimes putting a thing down is the bravest way to hold it. The room broke into applause with the kind of cheer that sounds like both courage and relief. I looked for JB and found him by the projector, wiping his eyes like a man who forgot what tears were for. We didn't win anything that night that looks good in a brochure. The church issued statements about my instability and my ingratitude and my failure to appreciate how much they had invested in my potential. The county posted a notice about reviews. Lawyers called, emails came. Eden released a clarifying document with numbers that looked impressive until you asked what they represented and who counted them. But our kids slept. That matters. Sometimes the scoreboard is a child not waking up terrified at 2 a.m. because anybody can knock on a door with a badge. The river school became a room with a waiting list, a list that made me both proud and embarrassed. You can be proud of the line outside your kindness and embarrassed that your town has a line at all. We bought more chairs with donations that came in 10s and 20s with notes like, "I needed someone to sing with me when I was 9. We bought inhalers when the clinic ran out. We bought a used upright piano that 2 men rolled down the block with a dignity that made neighbors clap the way people clap for a small boat making it to shore. Tia Soul put a jar on her counter that said, "We don't sell prayer." People drop coins and their shoulders lowered. Trust is heavy until it isn't. I thought the worst had passed. The worst does not pass. The worst takes naps. A week after the live stream, a reporter from a morning show called and wanted me to come on between a segment about a dog who can count and an author who bakes. "We'll keep it positive," she promised, which is television code for "we will keep it harmless." "I don't want harmless," I said. "I want helpful." "Helpfulness tests poorly," she said without apology. I declined. We went back to practicing breathing. Eden disappeared from the pages that once told us what she ate for breakfast. Grant released a book with a title so vague it nearly evaporated when spoken. He booked a tour until he didn't. He sat for a profile with a magazine that loves a man reinventing himself. The photos looked like redemption, which is a look. The article used words like tumult and journey and lessons. I read the first paragraph and then I closed the tab and made rice and beans for the kids who stayed late. A month later, we held a recital in the gym. We strung borrowed lights. We printed programs on paper that would crumple too easily if anyone cried. We placed the piano carefully so the bad leg wouldn't wobble under the weight of kids' dreams. The room filled with parents and aunties and men who are not related but always show up. You learn a lot about cities by who shows up for children. Before the first piece, I told them a story about the first choir I ever sang in, how the director would tap her chest and say, "Put the sound where the truth lives." I asked them to do that tonight. Put their sound where their truth lived. Then we played. After the bows, when the folding chairs scraped the floor into a kind of music of their own, JB tugged my sleeve and handed me an envelope. "This came for you," he said. The handwriting was careful, old-school cursive with loops that taste like Catholic school and correction in red pen. Inside, a letter, no return address. The ink the color of black tea. "Camila," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I did one brave thing late. A long confession from a woman whose name I will not write here, because salvation isn't a possession either. She told me a story about a boy who was born from a terrible night and a terrible silence, how she raised him like he was legitimate and learned too late that he wasn't, and how sometimes the things you love most are the ones you made out of fear. She wrote that her son was not her husband's, that she built a house out of shame and called it family, that she taught a child that love was a transaction, because that is what the world taught her. She said she was sorry, as if sorry had a bank account. She said she had known who I was since the first day I sang in that room, because a woman knows when a voice is lifting something it does not confess. She said she had seen what we built and wanted to give everything she owned to it. I read it twice, and then I put it away because we had chairs to stack. There is no neat ending to a story about living people. Living people mess up the math. They leave and come back and leave again and call it 2 a.m. and laugh at funerals and mispronounce forgiveness. But if you need an ending because YouTube likes endings, here is one. One morning, months later, an almond tree sent up leaves in the yard we had cleared behind the building. We hadn't planted it, not on purpose. Miri named it Chance. Every day, she watered Chance with the seriousness of someone whose breath has been negotiated by strangers and decided she is done with negotiations. On the day grant writers showed up to take pictures that would make them look inevitable, Miri tucked a note under the small mound of dirt at the tree's base. I only know because she asked me for tape and a pen. "What does it say?" I asked. She shook her head because children do not owe you transparency to earn your love. A year after we went live, we held another gathering. Not a service, not a rally. A room where people took turns like elementary school and tried not to cry while telling the truth. A woman spoke who said she had joined prayer well in good faith and wanted to sue someone, but instead decided to sew because her grandmother told her sewing is suing the devil. A teenage boy read a poem about his mother's phone that vibrates at 3 a.m. with messages from a church that says it can hear the cry in the dark, and he asked if maybe we could turn off the robots and learn to listen to actual people with actual ears. A man stood and said he still loved the songs from the church and didn't know where to put them because they live inside him like furniture he can't afford to move. When it was my turn, I didn't have much. I'm not good at conclusions in public. I said thank you. I said sorry for the times I taught people to sing through pain instead of out of it. I said I was nervous that if I talked too long, I would start apologizing to men who do not deserve my apologies. People laughed the kind of laugh that forgives without pretending it didn't hurt. After, on the sidewalk, a woman touched my arm. "I was invisible until I read about you," she said. "I still am sometimes, but now I know I'm not transparent. I'm just temporarily misplaced." "I understand," I said. "You got your name back," she said, not asking. "Yes," I said. "Camilla." "Camilla," she repeated carefully, as if fitting a stone back into a wall. "I don't know what you'll do with this story. Maybe you'll click away because a cooking video came up or a dog did arithmetic. Maybe you'll save it and forget it and find it again when someone says something behind a curtain and your breath leaves. Maybe you'll send it to a cousin who thinks hope is for other people. Maybe you'll write me to say I got it wrong. If you do, I'll read it. I read everything now, even the unkind things, because sometimes a cruel sentence has one true word in it and I don't want to miss the seed because I hated the field. The river school is still a room with air. We teach breathing and fractions and how to look someone in the eye when you say their name. We keep a jar for inhalers and another for new strings and another for the emergency that will always come on a Tuesday when you are out of everything, including patience. We keep a notebook by the door where people write the thing they don't want to forget when the next storm blows through. Some of the notes are grocery lists because bodies need meat and milk and greens. Some are small prayers without app permissions. Some are numbers, a cousin's, a clinic's, a neighbor's uncle's who welds swings and sometimes fixes bent things that were never meant to hold that much weight. Sometimes I sit at the piano and pretend I am practicing when I am actually listening. I play an E major when the room is tired because E reminds people of summer and the color of lemons and the way the air tastes when the freezer gives you a popsicle after you cried. I play C minor when we are brave and B flat when we need to confess we do not know what tomorrow is for. The kids roll their eyes at my analogies and then go home and call their aunts and say the piano teacher is crazy, but I think she loves us, and that is enough music for any life. If you're still here, thank you. If you are tired of men with microphones telling you the price of forgiveness, Take a breath with me. Count to 4, hold 2, out for 6. Put your sound where your truth lives. And if anyone asks you to trade your voice for a verse of the day, tell them you already have a verse, and it goes like this. We belong to each other, even when someone with a billboard says otherwise. Later, when the last chair squeaks into its stack and the lights click off in reluctant sections, and JB leans on the doorframe and says, "You okay?" I say, "No," and smile, which is another way of saying yes. We lock up and step into the damp night. Down the block, a trumpet misbehaves itself gloriously. The almond tree holds its small leaves like green hands. Miri is arguing with a friend about which note is the bravest. Everyone is wrong and everyone is right. I tuck the key into my pocket. My name is Camilla. I left a church that hid what it should have shown, and I learned that hiding is the oldest sacrament of shame. I learned to sing without asking permission. I learned the only audit that counts happens in the quiet, when you ask yourself what you saved and what you sold, and you answer without a brand guide in your lap. Tomorrow, we will open the door again. Somebody will need water, somebody will need a ride, somebody will need forgiveness and not the performative kind. We will put out chairs. We will argue about snacks and commas. We will sing, and when we forget the words, because people do, we'll hum until the memory arrives. That's all a choir is, really. A bunch of people promising to breathe at the same time, so nobody runs out alone. If you need a place to practice that, we'll leave the light on.